Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to my YouTube channel again. And today we are going to talk about another interesting topic. And a lot of you have asked me about, how to write backend code in Dart. So I have already created a lot of videos around Aqueduct and all, but those are now kind of shut off. The projects are not working anymore. So we are looking into something new, which is a little bit futuristic. So I'm gonna open this particular website here, which is serverpod.dev. So this is another work which is being done in the community, and it's another open source project to build scalable app server, and it's totally focused on Flutter community for Flutter apps and whatever, right? And you can see what it offers is world-class logging, built-in caching, ORM support as well, right? It also supports authentication via social logins, right? So a lot of things are there. It's still not in stable mode, but it's an early release. You can directly use Docker to deploy your projects, and it also comes with database which is set up already for you. So a lot of good things are there, and I just wanted to explore it, so I thought I should make a video as well about exploring it. And here on the left I have opened the documentation. So it says that's a next generation app and web server. What is the good part, that it automatically generates the APIs for you on client side, and it also offers a Flutter application along with that, which you can use. So again, you can see there is a roadmap section which you can definitely explore, and there are some decision made while making Serverpod. You can read about it here. I'm not going into that detail. I'm just trying to explore it, and you can also check that what you need to install it. So basically you need Flutter and Dart. That's the first priority, and then also you need Docker. So how to activate it? You have to run this command. So I have already activated it, but let's do it again. So I'll just open item for myself, and I can write over here dart pub global activate serverpod CLI. As soon as I click enter, it will run the serverpod CLI. It will download few things here and there, and then it will reach to a conclusion saying that okay, it has activated serverpod CLI 0.9.4. and then I can check it by running serverpod, and that should do the job. Okay, so it's working fine for me. So everything is sorted. Now the second thing is that once you are done with this, then you have to download Docker. Without Docker, so as of now Flutter Serverpod does not support to use Serverpod basically without Docker. So you have to go to this link, and you can install Docker desktop for Mac. If you're using Intel Mac, then you can download using this link, or if you're using M1 Macs, then you can use Mac with Apple chip. So I have already installed it, so that's something which I have already done. Then you have to create your project using a particular command, and then it will give you three things. One is mypod server, mypod client, and mypod Flutter. And it also offers two data base services to you. One is Postgres, and so you can use Postgres database, and it also install Redis. We'll go into details later, but as of now this is what you need. And so do you have to do it manually? No, actually you just have to install Docker, and it will do the job for you. So if I open Docker, as of now, you can see I have nothing here. It just says that containers are like no container running, images. There are some images which are which is not of any use as of now. But okay, what we have to do, we have to just go to our CLI, and we can go to the folder where we want to create the project. So I can just say cd desktop, and that dev, and I have dart dev folder. So I'll just go there, and here I'll create a project. So I'll just say server pod, right? Create, and the name of the project which we are giving is my pod, for example. It will take some time and it will create the project for me. So it's gonna be a very smooth process. And once you are done with that, what you have to do, you can run docker command to run your services, or you can just go to docker. Okay, so it's saying all setup, you are ready to rock. And if we I just write ls, then I can see I have two folders. One is code design, which is an old one, and my pod. If I go to cd my pod, then also you can see we have a lot of folders. One is my pod server, one is my pod client, and my pod flutter. So what I'm gonna do, I will go to cd my pod, I will clear it out, and what I'll do, I'll run this folder inside VS Code. So let's see what we get. So yeah, this is what we got. So let me just do it, okay, like this. So now what I'm doing, let me increase a zoom a little bit, so 150%. So one thing I have got is my pod client, where there is some auto generated code as of now, which is my pod client, which is not doing much. And then in the source you can see we have client.dart, example class, protocol.dart, like very simple stuff. Then we have a Flutter app as well, where in the pubspec.yaml you can see it is just redirecting like the package or dependency which it is using, which is nothing but my pod client. So I'll tell you how it uses that. And the last thing is my pod server, which if in the YAML you will see Serverpod is there as a dependency. And then there are a lot of things, like you can see we have a docker compose YAML file. So if we open it, then you can see it is using what services. So it is using Postgres, and the version is 14.1. These are the pods, and this is the DB name, my pod, and these are the volumes which we'll explore. And it is also using Redis, where there is an image Redis 6.2.6. Okay, so this is something. And then another interesting thing, or maybe important thing for you, would be the config folder, where we have different configs depending upon what kind of development we are doing. For example, if we are in development mode, then the config says what is your public host, public port, public scheme, and database related setup, and Redis setup as well. And if you are doing, for example, build for staging or production, then things will change accordingly. So we have all of these things coming by default, we don't have to do anything. And in the generated you can see the tables, which is tables.pgsql. You can use a particular third-party service to see them. So, and in the lib at the end there is server.dart, which is not doing anything but just saying that start this pod, which have just protocols and endpoints. Endpoints is how we will make APIs, so we'll check that as well. In the source we have a generated folder which is being generated, which I'll show you. In fact, we have a protocol folder as well, where we have YAML file which says example, and these are the fields. Then we have future calls. Right now it's not of something which you might use directly. And in the endpoint, this is very important, where we have example endpoint. So what it is doing, example endpoint is just a class. This name is very important, which you use along with endpoint. So right now the name is example. So this will be helpful in our API URL, and it extends endpoint, which is required whenever you have to create some APIs. And then there is a method which is hello, and it returns hello, and you also pass the name. This session parameter is important, but and it is required, but along with that, with it you can add any number of parameters. So as of now it is just asking for a name, and then it is displaying that. So this was the basic setup. On the client side, what we are doing, if we see client.dart, then we are actually, if you can see, we are just extending the endpoint reference, and these are all generated by default automatically. You don't have to do anything. You have to just run a command called serverpod generate, whenever you write something to the server side. And that's the beauty of this particular thing. You might also think that, why to install Docker and all those kind of things for simple APIs. So obviously, that's something which is not being supported as of now. You have to install Docker and all, but I am sure in the future, this will be an optional thing to do. And then if we go to example class, then you can see that it is already generating this serializable file, or I would say example file, where you have model, basically, where you don't have to manually do that stuff, that what are the fields and all. Okay, so this is more or like the setup part which you get. Now let's open Docker and let's see what we get with Docker. So now if you can see in the Docker, I have one MyPod server which is running. Okay, I can directly open in VS Code from here. I can start from here, or I can write a command. Writing command is also one way of starting it, or you can just click on this play button, and what we get is MyPod server Redis Postgres, and then this is something which is not of your interest. Okay, so let's just start it from here and let's see what happens. So it is now running. So you can see here it says running, and it is running on port 8091, and the second one is running 8090. Once your server is started, you can also if you click here, you can also check the logs, which db loaded and all those kind of things we can see here. So this is another good part. Now coming back to our VS Code, so what we can do, let's open VS Code again, and how we can run this server. So that's another thing which we have to see. So what we can do, we can just open terminal, and inside this terminal we can just say dart. Okay, and we can just say bin slash main dot dart. And okay, what happened? Okay, it's saying that there is some problem. There is no directory as such. Bin does not exist. Okay, we have main dot dart in bin. Okay, maybe, oh, we are in the MyPod thing, where we have to just go to MyPod server, and then we can just run this command. So now, as you can see, our server is server ID 0 listening on port 8080, and inside it is saying that it is listening on port 8081. And this is what you have to do. We are inside the my pod server. So how we can use it, right? So what we can do, we can also run this Flutter application. So here, from here, what I can do, I can run it on, for example, let's say iOS simulator, and we will see. So as you can see, my pod server is also running, so that's totally fine. Here is my application which I can see, and my server is running totally fine. There is nothing wrong in that. And what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna run this on my iPhone. So this, if you see this MyPod Flutter, this is auto generated by this Serverpod create CLI tool. We haven't done anything, and because it's made especially for Flutter apps, so it gets a lot of things done. So it will take a while, and in the meantime we can just explore the code what is written. So there is a client which we are declaring, which is running on localhost 8080, and then what we are doing is basically we have a string result message, error message, and using the text controller we take the data from there and we send it. So we can use directly client, which we are getting. If you see, we have imported MyPod client, and using client we can access any endpoints. For example, we are accessing example endpoint, and there is a method called hello, and then we are passing the text. So now if you see, we have this data here, so we can send some data from here to server. For example, if I say enter your name, so let's say I enter Pawan. So now if I say send to server, so you can see the message saying hello Pawan. And if I go back to my VS Code here in the output or in the terminal section, I can see that in the logs that there was a method call made to example.hello, and the duration was 11 milliseconds and number of queries 0, authenticated user null. So this is what you can do. So now you might be wondering, okay, this is fine, Pawan, what, how I can create my own endpoints, right? So that's a very valid question. So what we can do, let's end the server. Okay, let's kill the server by Control C. Now what I'm gonna do, I'll go to my pod server. In the lib folder there is a source folder and there is an endpoint folder. Okay, so for example, we can create a new file. We can just say test endpoint dot. Okay, so what we will do, we can just say a class called test, and we can say test endpoint. The naming convention is important here. Whatever you just want to use it with endpoint, and which can extend endpoint. Okay, so endpoint, that's it. What we have to do now, we have to import this endpoint. So we can just import library serverpod dot. And here what you can do, you can create your own methods. For example, I can have another feature saying that return a string, and I can name it anything. So for example, I can say yeah, it's saying get test, and it will just return test. Or yeah, so this can be a testing server pod app, for example, right? So once you are done with this part, what you can do, you have to also, whenever you are specifying a method, you have to give session for sure. So that's something which you don't have to forget. This should be the first parameter, and then you can add multiple parameters if you want. For example, if I want to add another parameter, for example, it can be string version. Okay, so let's say if I pass a version, then I can just show a version here, right? And if it is null, then we can also make it a default value. For example, we can just say okay, so we can just say 1.0, something like this. Okay, so we can do that. And now how we will generate the client side code for it. So inside the mypod server, we can just say server pod generate. Okay, what it will do, it will generate some client side code for me, and using that I can use that particular thing in my Flutter code or my client side. So if you see my pod client here in the lib folder, in the source we have example class for sure, right? And we have client class as well. So inside client we have endpoint example, right? um, where it is saying that we have a method called hello, and using this I am using that, and now it has one more endpoint test which I have just created, and there is something called get test similar to what method I have created. And now how I can access it on my Flutter app. So first of all, I'll run the server dot bin slash main dot, as you can see. So now if I go to my Flutter app here, so I'll go to my Flutter application. So inside main dot, if you see right now it is saying client dot example dot hello. Rather than that, I will say client dot test dot get test. Okay, so inside that, what I can pass, I can pass for example this as a version. So there must be something called a version, which I don't know if it directly supports. I don't think it supports directly that. So let's remove this part, in fact, and let's see if it displays something. Okay, so that's a problem, that you cannot have optional parameters as of now, I guess. So now let's try if this works. I'll do a hot restart, and now we have sent to server. So whatever I write doesn't matter, it should send me what we have written here. Let's say if I go back to my server, then it should return me what I have written in the test endpoint, and that is testing server pod app version 1.0 1.0, right? So if I, let's say, let's write pk send to server, then you can see we get testing server servpod app 1.0, something like that. That's what we have written here. Okay, so this is how you can use it directly without writing that much code. You can also see the method call over here, right? And you can also what you can do, if we want, in the Flutter app, we can do more changes. For example, when we let's say on initialization, okay, let's call init state. Here itself we can fetch the result message, and or let's say we can say get some data. And how we can get this data? We can create a method called get data, which will be a synchronous method. Okay, and here we can just say that I want to have result message, and I can get it from client dot example dot hello, and I can give a name, for example pk. Okay, and then I'll just do a set state. So what it will do, let's do that. Let's do a hot restart, and you can see hello pk by default whenever the app is running for the first time. So a lot of things you can do. So this is a basic introduction to Serverpod. Now you must be wondering how I can use these methods, right, directly. For example, in terms of API, this is fine for Flutter, because you know this like Flutter, it's easy, right? So for that you can use something called Serverpod Relic, which is still an experimental project, but there is another way to test it as an API. So right now I'm using Thunder client on VS Code itself to do a new request. So for example, here I can do a request for localhost. So for example, if I say http colon colon 127.0.0.1, which is for localhost, and 8080 port, and slash, if I send it, then you will see we got status 200, and it is saying okay, which means our server is running fine. Now I have recently, if I go to test endpoint, so what you can see, we have a test endpoint, and now I have this API. So how I will access this API? Okay, so what I have to do, I have to write slash test. Test is basically because the endpoint name is test, and then I have to insert some JSONs. For example, I can say, so if I just hit this API directly, it will be a post request. If I do this, you will see we have got 400 bad requests. Why? Because we are expecting here a method which is a get test method. So what I can do, I can specify something here called a method. Okay, so I can just say, or I can just say method. Okay, expect like this, and method name I have to give. So I can just say get test. Okay, and now if I send it, then you can see status 200. Okay, testing Serverpod app 1.0. So this is how you can test it using API. For example, similar thing I can do for example, and this time if I send it, it will be 400 bad requests because the method name is not get test, but it is hello. So if I send, so it is saying 500 internal server error. Why it is saying that? Because it is also displaying that type null is not a subtype of type string. Why it is saying that? So if we go to example, you will see one more interesting thing. So example endpoint, it takes in the hello, it takes a parameter called name, which is not optional, right? So for that we have to specify in the request that what is the name parameter. So name is, for example, I say Flutter. Okay, so now if I send it, you will see hello Flutter in the response. So this is a very new and interesting way of handling things. You don't have to set up Postgres or Redis by yourself. All is done automatically. You just have to install Docker. Again, it's compulsion as of now, but there will be things improvement in the future. So if we go back to this, you can see this is all the steps which you can see here as well. We will go into details in the future. Let me know if you are interested in this particular library or framework or whatever you want to call it. And if you are interested, definitely let me know in the comments. And don't use it as of now in the production, probably because it's fairly new, but we will keep checking it, and we'll probably make more video on this. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, press the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're not the subscriber already. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye, take care.